In over 3 decades, I've learned that truly great car dealerships are only great because of one thing: leadership. So I'm sitting down with the great men and women inspiring automotive on TimTalks, Automotive Leadership and Beyond.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining yet another episode of TimTalks. This series is Leadership and Beyond. Today, I have a very, very special guest. I know I say that a lot. This dude is close to my heart. We're pretty good friends. I got to know him many years ago. I believe it was at a Brian Pash event. But he is always interviewing vendors, dealers, but I don't know if you know his story. And the guy that needs no introduction on this podcast is the one and only Paul J Daly, Esquire. Well, there's no Esquire. Sorry. Paul, welcome to TimTalks, brother.
I knew coming on the show was a great idea. I feel so good. Can we do this once every morning before I get started?
Yes, I can be that movie, I'm Going to Get You, Sucker, which may or may not be appropriate to mention on this podcast. But there was a scene where a actor in that movie had his own theme music that would follow him down the street. So as I woke up in the morning, in fact, I'm not kidding you, and I think I've erased it now, but I had David Spizak because he has that
that's a baritone right there.
And I said, David, would you be so kind to kind of tuck me in at night? Can you just record something in my phone?
Did he do it?
He's like, oh yeah. He's like, Tim, you've had a long day. You've worked really hard. You enjoy some rest. I mean, it was freaking
That's
beautiful.
Unbelievable.
It was amazing. And I had it for years, but there it is, but my
he could record a whole Spotify playlist. Put the whole family to bed.
Audiobook or
it's called putting the family to bed with David Spizak, right? And he can do one for dad, for mom, for the kids.
Tag him in this post so he knows we're loving on him a little bit.
The funny part is too, a lot of people don't know about him. He was a stand-up comedian, legitimately working the clubs, and funny.
Before the Mercedes store?
Oh yeah.
Stop.
Somewhat during. Actually, at ASOTU last year, he did a little comedy set at the welcome reception. I brought him out of retirement. But the fact is that he is a very funny individual. And you pair that, he's just an entertainer. It's just a freak of nature that he ran the most efficient and profitable dealership in the country at one point. But he's a performer. I mean, I've seen pictures he sent me. They were never published of him wailing on an electric guitar on stage.
Stop.
Oh yeah. You have to have him on the show.
Hey, let's he's going to start doing Dos Equis commercials, the most interesting man in the world.
I think that is maybe what he plays in the morning while he's getting ready. I don't often drink beer, but when I do,
it's Dos Equis. I don't usually do podcasts, but when I do, it's TimTalks.
Now I hear the Nacho Libre soundtrack in my mind. Funny story about that. Literally today, have you ever seen Nacho Libre?
Yes.
They have that little song in the beginning. It's called "A Real Religious Man," and they have that little tin whistle. Doo, 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 doo.
I don't remember that part.
Well, that's the song. And literally today, as I'm driving to pick up my lunch, I put that song on the radio. And I just sent a 20-second clip of just me driving and that music on to my family, and it made their day.
Awesome. I didn't get it, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, you'll get it.
That's okay.
You'll catch up.
Listen,
now that we've lost all our listeners,
now that we've literally lost everyone, I do want to jump right in to again the whole reason I thought, well, you know what? I see Paul all over the place with ASOTU and ASOTUCon and State of the Union podcast and all of that. I think it would be important because I bet a lot of people don't know your story. I'm fortunate to know your story, but let's go back to how you got in the space. I would like to talk about that, and then we're going to get into some leadership stuff. Then we'll land the plane and we'll go home. But let's talk about the dent stuff. I mean, how did you get in the automotive space just in general? Let's start there.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about I'm an avid podcast listener. I love hearing people's stories because there's always a thread in there that I relate to.
Yep.
Right. And you never know who's going to relate to what. And I think that's just how, like, through our own journeys and stories, is how people kind of connect with us. And then a lot of times there might be a thread that unlocks something in other people, which is why I think the value of telling people stories. And I know you do as well. I never set foot in a car dealership in my entire life until I was in my early 20s. My family, I grew up in South Philadelphia, go Birds. My dad was a union phone installer. It was the typical South Philly. My parents were the typical South Philly, relationship mess, if I can put it like that.
Right.
We had like my grandparents, we had a full-blooded 100% Irish man marry a full 100% Italian woman. And like, that's the South Philly. You get all the Irish, all the Italian. My parents got married. And I'm the second. My sister and I are 18 months apart. I'm the second of 5. I have 4 sisters. And, we were raised real blue collar. My parents didn't know what to do with money. My dad seemed to work all the time, but we never seemed to have enough. And they just were doing the best they could with what they were given to raise 5 kids, with what they had. So went to high school, always wasn't into high school. I got good grades, but education came easy to me. I was friends with everybody in the school. I didn't have a lane that I ran in. It wasn't like the jocks or the nerds or whatever.
You're a Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, I guess kind of that. Not as cool. Didn't have
For
a
you
car.
young folks, look it up on Netflix.
Yeah, you'd have to rent it at Blockbuster, I think, to see that.
Right.
And so I decided I was going to go to a Bible college. Thought I was going to go into ministry. That didn't happen. But I got out of college and I met a car dealer. And he was in this small town that I was in called Oswego, New York, a little bit about 30 miles north of Syracuse. He offered me a job. I was looking for a job. I had just gotten married. And he's like, I have this job. It was to be a service advisor. And I walked into a dealership and I was like, well, this is an interesting place. Totally foreign. You forget, if you go in a dealership and you're not used to it, it is like a barrage of moving parts and departments and paging and
sensory overload. Yep.
Crazy. But I was like, I don't know anything about cars. And he said, I need somebody who knows about people. And I think you'll do really good with people. I have technicians that know about cars. So I'm always wired to try anything. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I fell in love with it. I was in charge of the blue team. It was a small Chevy dealer. I had 3 techs under me, Chris, Steve, and Will. And they were all very different. One was older, more experienced. One was younger. One was a hothead. It was great. And all of a sudden, I found myself in the middle of this interaction between people who had problems with their cars and technicians who fixed them, with a dealership leader who was focused on leadership principles and the future and rational thinking and creating opportunity. And I just fell in love with the industry. So that's how my first position was a service advisor. I did great, excelled. We were hitting numbers, hitting marks. Then I saw somebody reconditioning cars and I was like, that's interesting. Had a friend who was doing it. I started a reconditioning business with the kind of like the blessing of the dealer principal. I was like, I know this is weird because you're kind of my boss and this would kind of mean I'd be leaving a position that's hard to fill. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he's like, if you want what's best for your people and you really believe that, you want what's best for them, not what's best for you. He said, you should do this. You're going to do great at it. And we went out to the wholesale line and we got a Chevy Astro. If you remember those, it was a 1980 Chevy Astro cargo van off the wholesale line, leaking transmission lines were rotted out. The oil pan was rotted out. Gave it to me for $400. I had one of the techs on my team, Steve White was his name. I just bought
Steve
the parts.
White from Clairvoy.
Not that Steve White. Very different. Very different
Okay.
Steve White.
Just making sure.
Very different. Unless he was reincarnated as Steve White from Clairvoy.
That's another conversation.
That's another podcast. And off I went to build a reconditioning company. It started with wheel repair, ended up growing that over almost 15 years to be a regional reconditioning company that serviced about 50 to 60,000 vehicles a year. So that's kind of like, in which case I got to meet hundreds of dealers across the Northeast. And it just became my vocation. Like I just fell in love with the industry. Everyone I knew that was a good leader or cared about people or hardworking, empathetic, they were all dealers. And I had never known a dealer. I mean, I didn't even know anyone with the word manager in their title my whole upbringing. Like in anything until I got a job at Burger King at like 16 and the shift manager. And I was like, they have it all. They're a manager.
Yeah. And you could have it your way.
I did.
At Burger King. That's good. So take us. I think there was an exit. You got someone bought your business,
Yeah,
right?
Dent Wizard International. Yeah,
and that was 8 years ago.
yeah, about
8 years ago.
I'm not big with dates and name. Yeah, there.
I'll tell you what happened. So anyway, and then we met. I think I was doing Brian Pash usually has a Sunday morning like talk or devotion or whatever, and I believe I was leading that. And that's the first time I met you. Yes.
Yeah, it was in Napa.
Yeah, in Napa. Unbelievable.
That was my first time there.
And you were trying to figure out, like, you weren't even officially. There was no Congruent back then, right? There was Congruent.
So Congruent is my agency, and Congruent actually incubated within the reconditioning company, which is called Image Auto.
Got it.
I had started making content around our company culture before there was even YouTube. Like, we didn't have a way to distribute content. The only thing I knew how to do, like, intuitively, was build culture and do things on top of culture. So we'd make videos about our culture. We'd show them at our like team meetings. Everyone was separated, but we'd bring everybody together every quarter. We'd show them there. We'd give them a DVD with the content on there. Like, you can watch the video at home and show your family and stuff.
Right.
And then, so little by little, I started doing things for other people. And so Congruent was kind of born out of that. And then when the acquisition happened, I like tripled down on building an agency. And that was right in that time when I came to that first Pash event. So Congruent did exist.
And you were trying to figure out not necessarily the space, but your space within the space, right?
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And you were just listening, and you told me, hey, I'm just trying to figure out. But let's, I think, now we get to, and I know obviously you and I have talked multiple times, but we get to, why we're doing this series of leadership. And I know you have seen the same thing, the Patrick Abaz, the Kevins, the on and on and on we go, that the one consistent thread with these successful dealerships is leadership. Mm-hmm. So talk about, what are some of the things that you've seen with, and again, you have the best of breed all the time, and ASOTU, and what are some things that intrigue you about those best of the best, and maybe some not so great things? I mean, there's just free for all on basically the automotive state of the union, no pun intended, with the leadership space and what's happening, and dealers that are getting it and what they're doing.
So I think that just when you think about leadership in general, there is just like any powerful thing, whether that's why people call things a double-edged sword, but anything that actually has power, it can really make a mess of things quickly. Like, if you've ever rented like a backhoe, like a mini excavator, something that has hydraulic power, right? It's going to help you dig a trench way faster, right? You're going to get something done in an hour or two that would have taken you 2 days and 3 people to do, right? So it's got this insane power, but drive it a little too close to something, spin the bucket the wrong way, and you can like destroy the side of a house. And that's what I think of leadership, and the examples that I've seen over the last 15, 20 years, and the people I've had on the shows, or the dealership leader, the massive leadership that I see in the automotive industry. I think we've seen examples of both. And I think we see it in politics, and you see it everywhere. Leadership in and of itself, like the word, you could have terrible leadership that can destroy people's lives. And so I know when we talk about leadership, the premise of the show is like, how do we like harness the points of leadership, like for the intrinsic value of why I think leadership is a principle in this world that we occupy. It's a principle in relationship. It's a principle in family, a principle in organization. And the point of leadership is that, I boil it down to thriving. Like, leadership, its initial intent is to produce thriving in and through other people. And so the indicator is always like, well, who's thriving? Who's thriving as a result of that person's actions? Or who's being destroyed as a result of that person's actions? Or who's wasting their time because of that person's actions? And so in our industry, I think, like when you mentioned Patrick Abad and some of these people were around, I think there are signs of deep thriving whenever good leadership is involved. People have stories. You see people staying around. You see people like this multiplication effect of businesses growing, or more people following a cause, or more people coming alongside and saying, we're willing to march in this direction with you. And so like when I think about leadership, I tie it to the word thriving, because that really is the output of any good leadership.
In fact, I wrote that down. That is good stuff. To produce and thriving in and through others, through people. So why do you think, and just taking the gloves off and not worrying about being politically correct or whatever, why do you think it's like incredible leadership, like good leadership, the good, you talked about Patrick, Kevin, speaks like on and on and on. We see a lot of the good, but that's not normal. It's just not. Why do you think it's just not? And that's why it's like I was talking about my son's wedding before we got on this show, and just so proud of him. But one of the things is, he goes to work and he's got the right attitude, not all, but for the most part, that's not the norm these days. And I don't think the norm is that backhoe that you swing and you knock half the house down because, you were beat up, the old saying, hurt people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But what, in your opinion, why is it so unique, and why are we even talking about it? You should, too much is given, much is expected. When you do, why wouldn't you love them? Why wouldn't you encourage people? But there's so many people getting berated, not just in this automotive industry, but just in general, talk down to, demeaned, all the things. Why do you think it's so unique to have these shining lights that are making a difference? That's what I've been trying to say for weeks now in these podcasts. Guys, success leaves clues.
Yeah.
Right. And these steps, treat your people this way, and 40 plus, almost 50 people will leave Tampa and go to Cumming, Georgia to follow you because you're that kind of leader. Do these things, but yet it's so unique. Why do you think that is? Just straight opinion. This obviously, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, none of this
views expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the management.
These comments from Paul J Daly do not reflect TimTalks or anything Tim is affiliated with. No, in all seriousness, just what's your opinion? I'm curious.
I think, I don't know if this is getting so deep so fast, but I really think this boils down to an issue of identity. And when we think of issues of identity, really it's when we start to begin to think about our ego and how we see ourselves and what we need to do or need to get out of the world to make ourselves feel valuable or worthwhile. And I think in the senses of good leadership, we find secure individuals who understand that the major component of their identity is to see good in others lived out. And I think in the examples of a lot of the people we know, good leadership says, oh, I understand that what we need to do together, right? Because when you're leading, it revolves not just you. You can't lead by yourself. You can lead yourself, but when we're talking about leadership, how do I help these other people realize how they can be better, how they can improve, how they can get what they want? And that is actually a major component of the identity of the leader, right? It's a cultivating mindset. It's not so I can get X bank account, so I can have X amount of power or notoriety or this title. That doesn't mean those can't be ambitions inside a good leader. I think they are co-ambitions inside a good leader. But I think the primary driving force behind good leadership is they are secure enough in their own identity to want to see other people succeed. And that is what feeds back into who they are. And so it's an identity issue. I've seen, it's amazing, and you've seen this, I'm sure, as well. Amazingly successful, powerful, competent, talented, well-resourced people be incredibly insecure. And they don't realize you can see it, but it's plain as day. And I think that's what holds, I honestly would say that's the same issue that holds back people who maybe wouldn't see themselves in leadership, but might aspire to it. It comes right back to, like, I'm just thinking of myself. How can I benefit myself out of this? And I think when we see leadership rise up from, the most entry level of an organization through, they're the people who are like, how can I help other people win? And so, yeah, it comes back to identity. I know I rambled a little bit, not too controversial, I don't think.
I don't know how many times that I'm so happy to hear, not happy, it's actually sad, but it's so true. I have said, well over 1,000 times, and I'm sure it's been recorded 100 times, that the most dangerous characteristic of any organization is pride and insecurity.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, especially when people get promoted to a new role, right? And they have that new power, right? It's almost like, people talk about new money, right? Like people say that money just makes you more of what you really are, right?
Right. It doesn't, it exposes you. It doesn't change you. It exposes you.
Yeah. Now, show me somebody that mistreats a waitress or a waiter anyway, I can go on and on, but that person that gets that new title or that big position, and then all of a sudden they not completely change, but a lot of them changes. Mm-hmm. Or that person that's trying to go up the ladder, maybe you're we're talking about the car business, but maybe you're desk manager, sales manager, and you've been promised, a GSM spot, a GM spot, another, but we're so insecure. When it's the episode of Michael Scott when the CFO has a meeting with Jim in the conference room, and he's so insecure that he sneaks in the cheese cart, right? To see, like, he can't help not being in that meeting because they could be talking about him, right? So he sneaks in, and Andy Bernard gives them grated Parmesan cheese. And anyway, that's a whole other. We should have a podcast about The Office.
We could easily do that.
Easy. But in all seriousness, I mean, and I really think, not to simplify anything, I think it's a piece of it is, do we really want to make a difference? I mean, seriously, I truly believe, I've also said this before, I really believe that we live, and there's nothing wrong with social media. A lot of your business and my business, and it lives in social media, but there's a lot of people, unfortunately, we're all broken. Like, all of us have issues. All of us go through stuff, but we live these social media lives to where we want everybody else to think, X about us. And we've all been meetings before, or Clubhouse, when Clubhouse was really big, and or 20 groups or what. And we have this meeting, we have this, take this stance because we're in a group with like-minded people. But what are we really like behind closed doors? Like, what are we really like? What would our people say about us? Because it's easy in certain settings to say one thing. Oh yeah, our culture. It's just like the dealer that says, why do you buy from? Oh, our culture is incredible, but yet people are getting horse. And I'm not being ugly. It's just true.
No, man, I've seen that way too much.
And I think that we either need to make a decision. It doesn't mean you're perfect. At least for me, as ADD and broken as I am, and look, I hold no punches. I share everything. I'm as transparent as anyone. Maybe too much, but I have to keep good people around me. In fact, I had a sales call today, and I got 2 texts. Hey, you need to give this person a shout out. I can't remember, but those type of people around you. Hey, go love on Andrew. He freaking crushed it. Go love on Dakota. He crushed it. Go, and those types of people that lift you up. To where because at the figure, put those types of people around you, because at the end of the day, I would argue that most people in your organization, they want to be recognized for what they do. They want purpose. Yeah. For what they're
thriving. You can't thrive without purpose.
Yeah.
There's another component, and I probably struggle with this one more than it's a natural inclination for me to want to give other people credit. And it's just my nature. And, my wife tells me I don't celebrate the wins, and that's a detriment, actually, because a lot of people are involved in wins. And for me, I'm like, oh, it's not a big deal. Just keep moving. Like, let's not talk about it, which might seem a little counterintuitive because I happen to be like on the stage a lot, or on the shows a lot. But, taking credit for things actually makes me feel like it's an insecurity in me, honestly. Taking credit for things is something that makes me shy away. And I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's an issue there. But the part of leadership that I struggle with, and this again comes back to identity and security, is being willing to make people temporarily upset because you see something that they don't. And when you're leading and you're in the front, having to make decisions where people might not fully understand the decision or might not be happy with me or might get frustrated with their role or the situation that a business is in or a decision has to be made because, I see over the horizon saying like, hey, if we don't make these decisions now, everybody's going to be really unhappy, or I'm not going to be able to provide for you, in 12 months or 18 months. And this one of like a real practical thing right now is the use of AI, especially AI around creatives, is this element of like, I hate it. I don't like technology. I wish nothing ever changed. I want to go back to the old school. However, I do understand that in my responsibility to lead and take care of everybody who counts on me, we need to adopt AI as deeply and as quickly as we can if we want to win. And back to the principle of thriving, there are things that can thrive that temporarily don't feel like thriving, right? You know what I mean? Like, well, do you always feel like you're thriving? I think that's like the people that say, I always feel like I'm thriving. Like, no. It's the sum of all parts. Like, it's not a like, how do you feel in this moment at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday when it's raining outside? Do you feel like you're thriving? It's like, maybe. And so I think a big part of leadership are people willing to tell the truth. Again, Patrick Abad I've watched him in person masterfully handle hard news. And he's able to paint the big picture and he's willing to do it. He's willing to take the knock, but he's also willing to stand by people and see it through. And when enough people see that happen, they feel safe.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. We said, that I love that. In fact, we're going through a little bit of that right now. As far as seeing some things that we need to adjust, my favorite verse, one of my favorite verses is the prudent see danger and turn from it, but the simple keep going and suffer harm. I mean, what an amazing
basic wisdom.
Basic. Yeah. We see something ahead. I see a waterfall up ahead in the rapids. I see it, and we can keep rowing that way and let the current, or we can turn from it. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that say, I got this. When you were talking about thriving and being willing to, see things in other people that they don't necessarily don't, but you need to let them know because it's the better for them. I think I said this, I think last week, I think it's very important that a leader is not judged on what they do, but what people do because of them.
That's good.
And I think that, the people that we've had on this call, I think that, I've been to your studio in your office up in Syracuse, seeing that reaction, seeing the energy and the smiles on the faces and the people that are in a good mood there. Like you practice what you preach. And I think it's just incredibly, guys, life's short. I mean, it just is. And we have so much to do, so little time. But at the end of the day, in all seriousness, and this is not a sermon, and sometimes I give sermonettes, but it's so true if you just get it. I mean, at the end of the day, no one's going to care what kind of car you drove. They really are not.
Or remember.
They're really not going to care. But they're going to care. They're going to tell stories about, what? I was down. I tell it all the time. I was 17 years old selling cars in 1989. Yes, I know it's hard to believe that.
I remember what I was doing in 89.
That old, Paul. I am that old. But I can remember a sales manager. I don't even think he was a new car manager. His name was Dave. He was about 5'5", and I'm not a tall guy, but I remember he was a lot shorter than me. And I came in crushing it. And I was I was getting ribbed, typical car guy. I mean, they built this brand new, this is crazy. This is how long ago it was, kids. They built this brand new, beautiful dealership, and it's still there now. It's not a Hyundai dealership. It's Jake Sweeney, and we're privileged to have them as partners. Jake Sweeney, Kia, Kobe Sweeney is running that store, but they built a brand new dealership, and they had ashtrays on every desk. Like people were still smoking, and you could smell the paint. Dude, that's how long ago it was. So they just got rid of smoking sections like 2 years ago. So, but David took the time, and I'm talking about it 30 plus years later. And all he did was say, hey, Tim, let's take a walk. And he walks me up the hill. I still see it, still have a picture of the house. Walks me up the hill and says, listen, I've been in this business 25 plus years. He says, you can't listen to the noise. Called it noise back then, even when it wasn't cool. Can't listen to the noise. You have so much potential. He said, if you keep going, you could be very successful. And then he pointed at this house right across the street, which was 3 times bigger than the house I grew up in. And he's like, you can have a house like that one day. I'm talking about it 30 plus years later. It was a 15-minute conversation. So I think if the basic thing as leadership, and I heard this isn't mine. I heard Tim Tebow say this, and I've used it 100 times. When we chase significance in your people, in the people around us, success just comes. Just comes. Not easy. Sometimes you've got people that are hard to deal with on your team. You said you've got a hothead, you've got an older guy. There's different personalities and there's different people. I had a situation today where I went around and talked to somebody else. Hey, can you talk to her or him about this and really encourage him? Because sometimes your dad tells you to do something and then a friend of the family tells you to do the same thing, but they listen to the friend of the family.
And it makes all the sense. You're like, I told you to do that.
Oh, yeah. And so at the end of the day, guys, again, success leaves clues. Paul and I did not rehearse this. The fact that he talked about insecurity, be secure in who you are on a daily basis. You are a gift from God. You are beautifully and wonderfully made, and you are here for a purpose. And if you have the blessing to be in this business and be a leader, chances are you're doing pretty well. And I think if we stop every morning and we truly, and I think that's what it is, at least for me, and I've been doing this for years now, but waking up every single morning and just being grateful for the little stuff and starting and set those 3 words, set the tone for the day. And the most important one to me, if we really do it, is something that I learned from Maxwell, those 3 words, just for today, because I can handle today. But for mine is just for today, let me treat people as though they are all more important than me. And I want to encourage all of us, what would happen? Seriously, think about it. I dare you. I double dog dare you. For a couple days, start treating people in every situation. Yes, that's the person that cuts in front of you in the grocery line. What would happen if you treated people, if you treated your team, if you treated your receptionist, if you treated your custodial crew, if you treated your service tech or your line tech, if you treated if you treated everyone, that's what Kevin's doing. Kevin, who was just on, that's what Patrick's doing. That success leaves clues. I think lose this insecurity, start treating people, and then you watch and see what happens to your organization. Paul,
Sir.
Would you land the plane for us? Would you, any final thoughts on,
Yeah, I think whenever someone listens to a podcast this far or listens to any content, I always want to send them away with something that they can do, right? You gave them a dare. One of my business coaches, he was my coach for a long time. His name is Dave Meltzer. And he gave me such a simple task or step in this direction, right? How to grow in your purpose and security. And that starts with understanding that everything is a gift. And you said that, right? And he basically conditioned himself, and I've actually adopted this, and I'm most 90% of the time, this is what I do, is that I try to make the last thing that I intentionally think before I go to sleep, thank you. And I try to make the first thought when I wake up intentionally, thank you. And, I know that could come across as like cheesy or kitschy, but I'm telling you right now, it makes a difference in how you treat your family, you treat other people, you understand your identity and your purpose. Is that today is a gift. My responsibility is how can I be a source of thriving for other people? And again, back to it's like when you can adopt that as your identity, and I'm still working on that. But when you can, I think your leadership just goes to the next level and continues to grow on an incremental basis. So that's my parting thought.
Start the day with thank you. Start the day with gratitude. End the day with gratitude. Not to be solemn, but as we mentioned, I just became a grandpa, ladies and gentlemen.
Old man
just became a grandpa 6 weeks ago. And my son got married in Flagstaff last week. Just got back on Sunday. And, I was sitting there going through the emotions. I lost my mom. Some of you guys know. And the most encouraging thing not the most encouraging thing, but you know what was unique about my mom's funeral is that the majority of the flowers at my mother's funeral in that little church in Kentucky was from car dealers.
Yep.
That never met my mom. I saw that and I just lost it. But I started to begin to think about the impact that we make. But also because my mama wasn't there, my dad wasn't there either because he was confined to a wheelchair in an assisted living home, and thinking about all of those things and thinking that I'm grateful to, sometimes, especially in the car business, this problem in service and that problem and this sales, all that other stuff. But if we start out in this software company, whatever, we all have stuff. But when we break it down exactly like you said, we, Paul J Daly Esquire and Tim Cox, dare you. Because that's got me through. Because at the end of the day, we know that the majority of people, do you know that median, if you're in the top, I heard this on a podcast 2 weeks ago. Do you know what the top one, not in the country, but the top 1% of the world median income is? The top 1% in the
globally
world,
speaking.
Globally in the world, top 1%.
No idea.
$32,000 a year.
No way.
In the world. That's taking the billions of people in the world. That's taking
that's
the
staggering.
Third world country, 32. So listen, ladies and gentlemen, most of you on here are balling, right? Most of you on here have so much, not just finances, man, blessings of family and things and friends around you. I've got my friend Paul Daly on the other end of this screen, people that care about you and people that lift you up. Take a minute to take a breath. Thank you. Thank you. Just for today, I'm going to treat people as though they're more important than me. Paul, thank you so much, brother. It's been an absolute pleasure once again for us to hang out. Truly think a lot of you. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul's a real deal. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen his people. I've seen how he loves on his people. I see how his people react to him. And so thankful to partner with him in this thing called the automotive space. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Paul, for taking a few minutes. And thank you, as always, please download and follow us. Give us a quick follow at TimTalks, wherever you get your podcast, Leadership and Beyond. And as we always say, look, no one's smarter than everyone. Let's just continue to get better together. See you next time.